Okay, brilliant. Okay, yeah. Lynda, tell me more about the neuroscience aspect of your work then, please.
So I think what happens, and I think this is relevant to however you communicate with people, but is massively important for email, is that your brain works on three different levels. If you like, you've almost got three brains. So you've got the reptilian, which is the oldest part of your brain, which is responsible for all the stuff that keeps you alive. It's also responsible for your fight-flight response. So anything that happens completely automatically, breathing, movement, are all reptilian responses. When it comes to brain hierarchy, that will trump everything. If you're suddenly in a place where you can't breathe, everything shuts down other than your reptilian brain because it needs to keep you alive. Above that is something called the limbic brain, often known of as the monkey brain as well.
Right.
This is very much our emotional centers. There are two main areas, well, there's lots of areas, but there are two areas that really control how we behave and are relevant to how we connect. And that's the amygdala and the hippocampus. And what they are responsible for are time and space, memory storing, sorting out experiences that we've had and how we react to things critically. So particularly when you're communicating with people, when you're telling stories, it's this bit of the brain that fills in the gaps if people have got incomplete information. So if you tell people half a story in your email, they'll make the rest of it up. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. You want to be artfully vague in order for people to make their own buying decision. In other times, you actually don't want room for objections to creep in. So what you do is you give a complete story, but knowing how the other person's processing what they're reading is super helpful when you're actually constructing an email. So on top of the limbic brain is the bit that we all like to think that we function from, the neocortex, which is the logical processing, organized bit of the brain that is much bigger in humans than in other mammal species. And as I'm sure you guys know as salespeople, we love to think that that's where we make our decisions from. In actual fact, only 5% of our decision making comes from the neocortex. 95% comes from the limbic brain, which means that whenever we're crafting connection with people, we have to do it from an emotional point of view, because that's where people are making their decisions. That's where we, if you like, unconsciously live most of the time. However much post-rationalization we do, you know, I bought that pair of shoes because I really needed a specific pair for that. You bought that pair of shoes because they did something for you emotionally. And I think once we know that, we can use that in the way that we communicate with people. And I think it is that knowing that all of our information is fed into the limbic brain, it's rapidly processed in the limbic brain, and then we make decisions from the limbic brain most of the time. I think the other bit about that is that within this hierarchy, just as your reptilian brain trumps keeping you alive, your limbic brain will come in next. So if you feel emotionally threatened in any way, if you don't feel safe or you don't trust the other person, that will trump any rational decision of you know, this is a really sensible thing to do, but actually I don't really feel safe, so I'm not going to do it. So part of our job, which is much easier face-to-face than it is on email, is making that connection that enables the other person to feel safe, that they can trust you, and hopefully that they like you as well. So you tick all those buying boxes for them.
Okay. One thing I'm curious about, just say, it was the last bad day I had, last Friday. So last Friday I was making loads of calls. Nobody was around. Some clients had no money. Some clients are still on furlough. It was just a really bad day. And the 95% of my brain is like, oh, this is awful. And I think that's a natural human reaction, of course. How do we control or rewire that 95% of the brain to create better emotions and help us perform better?
I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it is so easy to absorb stuff that isn't actually about us and make it very personal. And that then affects the way that we show up and the way that we behave. And I think the way you just talked about reprogramming, some of it is that, some of it is having the ability to recognize in the moment what is cause and effect and related to you, and what is circumstantial and not related to you. So I always try and use this kind of premise of if you like, Covey's two circles. So what is my circle of influence? And what is my circle of concern? There's loads and loads of things that come into our circle of concern all of the time. Most of them we have no impact over whatsoever, like people not answering the phone, or other people being furloughed and not being in a position to buy from you. And yet when we take that personally, what that does is impacts our ability to show up and feel good about what we do. So if we look at our own circle of influence, the stuff we do have some control over, and focus our neurological activity on that, how do I serve people better? How do I crystallize the contribution that I am making? How do I add value for those people that aren't able to buy from me right now so that they stay connected with me? Those are the things that we have some influence over. And actually, when we start to look at those things and craft out a way of behaving that does more of that, that automatically tips our own neurology. And I think there's a couple of things that happen here. First is that the brain runs on kind of two systems, really. The sympathetic system, which is not at all sympathetic, that's your fight, flight, your response to stress, which releases things like adrenaline and cortisol, and literally narrows down your thinking to be able to just focus on the thing in front of you. What you need is to be in the parasympathetic system, which is oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all those things that help you feel more connected, help you feel more relaxed, much more restorative. And the best way to produce oxytocin is to connect with other people. The best way to fast track that connection is to help somebody. Sales is the perfect medium for helping people. So even if you can just reprogram yourself to be thinking, they might not have answered the phone, but actually I'm just trying to help them. I'm trying to add value. That enables your brain to start to produce oxytocin, which starts to calm you down, which makes you feel a little bit better in yourself, and that things are not quite so pointless, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I really like that, because it doesn't just apply to sales, it applies to real life as well. So charity work is a huge part of my life. And I've probably done more charity work during lockdown than usual because I'm living alone and I'm finding it so difficult. And I guess there's a selfish part of me that kind of gives more than he should because it makes me happy. And when I'm giving and asking for nothing back, it just, karma, good for your soul. I'm not sure what terminology you want to use, but it's all the same. It makes me feel better because I'm giving more to others and I'm asking for nothing back.
And this is something, sorry.
No, please carry on, Lynda.
This is something we often miss in sales, is that contribution is massive for people. And, whether you are buying from somebody or whether you're helping the person that is supposed to be selling you something, feeling that you've made some kind of contribution to that journey absolutely fast tracks connection for all of those neurological reasons I was just talking about. So when you are writing emails, for example, ask people for something, even if it's a reply, a comment, or whatever. And as you start to build that sort of feeling of reciprocity with people and the feeling that they are making a difference, that they're making a contribution, they are so much more engaged in the process. And you are much, much more likely to have an ongoing relationship with them. Because we do like to serve. It's good for our brains.
It is, but as a recipient, and Niraj, I'd be interested to hear where you stand on this. When I get an email, let's call it a sales email, since that's the subject we're talking about, but when I receive a sales email and the first sentence is, "Dear Keith, how are you?" I don't know where I think I know already where you stand on that. So maybe salespeople shouldn't try selling to salespeople, or just recognize you're trying to sell to them. That really irritates me, because I'm never going to make myself more vulnerable, if you like, to someone that I hardly know, where there's no trust, there's no relation, there's no connectivity, as you call it. So I wouldn't go so far as to say I was offended by that question, but from a sales standpoint, it's irrelevant. I want people to get to the point. Now that there's a really interesting change around COVID-19, and Lynda, you were saying that perhaps people appreciate email even more at this point in time from a connectedness. I would not put myself in that bracket, by the way. Now, maybe my wife says I am unusual, but no, and maybe I'm just majoring on that. But that, when we talk about sending emails, from a salesperson's standpoint, you want something to happen as a result of something, of someone opening that email. Don't put any barriers in there that are going to offend or delay something. I just want people to get straight to the point. Niraj, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, completely. About once a month, I'll do a post on LinkedIn saying how to write an effective email. And I'll take at random some terrible email I've had this week. Not a spam email, but an email from a very well-known company that spammed me, who's got a reputable website, and the person is quite senior up in the company, and still it's an appalling email. And then every now and again, I'll mix it in with an email that's actually quite good. And the difference is staggering. The ones that are quite good, they have a personal touch. They use really emotive language. They don't say, how are you? They don't say, hey. I had an email I put on LinkedIn about 2 hours ago, and the guy didn't even mention my name. He went straight into the conversation. The subject line was terrible, and he said he was talking about your online events you're currently running. I want to help you. I don't have any online events I'm running. It was so bad. This is a senior person in a big events company, and it was so badly written. It was shocking. There was no call to action at the end. There was zero connection. And, if people just make that little bit of an effort to spend 5 minutes on my LinkedIn profile or 5 minutes on my website or to comment on an article I've written or something I've posted on, I will always give them a little.
Yeah, absolutely.
But most people, sadly, I end up blocking. I mean, I block so many people. I'm thinking, this is so bad. Oh, God, this is embarrassing. Only once or twice I have deleted emails from friends who said to me, I hope you're well. During these unprecedented times. I didn't mean to, but I was just annoying me so much saying that. I've accidentally deleted 1 or 2 emails from friends. Why haven't you called me? I'm like, did you send me an email saying I hope you're well during unprecedented times? That's why.
Yeah.
I think there's something really important in that, though, isn't there? I think there's 2 or 3 things, actually, is that, first of all, sales is not an isolated activity. So you would never expect to send 1 email to a stranger and get a sale out of it. You have to build a kind of a relationship with people. You have to get some kind of connection. The second is that a lot of emails come out from mailing lists, so they go to a lot of people. And if you're sending to a mailing list, which we do all the time, you have to be able to write that email in a way that it connects with the people that you are trying to serve. And if you can't write the email in a way that connects, you might as well not bother to send it, because you're going to annoy more people than you're actually going to service.
Yes.
And I think the third thing is that, it's this value and relevance all of the time. If you're going to engage people, if you're going to ask them to do something as a result of the email, you have to give something first. And that doesn't mean that it has to be a really long, verbose email that wastes their time. It means that it has to meet them where they are and offer them something that helps them to take the next step in whatever bit is relevant to what it is that you are ultimately selling. And we should never apologize for the fact that ultimately our emails are leading to us growing our business, selling something, engaging with people, because that's what we're there to do. We should apologize if those emails are just irrelevant and using up people's time and mental energy, especially at the moment.
So out of curiosity, one thing I'm interested in, so you help business owners and leaders on courage, connection, and growth. So just say I'm a business owner, I'm just kind of really nervous, either because business is bad or because times are tough, which they are at the moment. And I come to you and say, Lynda, you got to help me. I'm really struggling. How would you help somebody on that level then?
I would first of all look at what was really important to them. So in terms of, if you like their mission, what are they here to do that's bigger than just their business? Because that's usually their point of connection. And it's also the thing that they will be most courageous about. So, for example, if I look at myself, I talk to people about mindset, about courage, about business growth, not because business growth is the most important thing on the planet to me. What is important to me is that as human beings, we're on here for a finite amount of time, and the worst thing that can possibly happen is that we shuffle off with a life unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And actually, if we can get courageous enough to do the stuff that's important to us, we have a much greater chance of living the life we want to live. Now, that in itself is nothing to do with business, but the medium that I help people to be courageous about is with their businesses. But that live the life you want to live is a universal connection point. It happens to be the thing that really matters to me. And I don't think that you can connect with people over stuff that doesn't matter to you. But when something's really important to you, it's really easy to get that emotional connection with people. And I think that's where I start. If I'm going to help somebody grow their business, if I'm going to help somebody to sell more stuff, to write better emails, whatever it is, you start with the things that are really important to them, the difference that they're trying to make, the stories that have brought them to that part, and you build out from there. Because actually, when something is so important to you that it's the very essence of who you are, you'll find the courage and not make an excuse. If it's meh, then you're more likely to make an excuse if it's something you don't really want to do.
Wow, I love that. What you said about being fulfilled and living a life with meaning is so important. So my father is a doctor. He's 73 years old, and 77 years old. We had to force him to retire at 73 because he just kept getting up every day and working 60, 70-hour weeks. He loved it. My mum's a physio. My brother's a tennis coach, and they are fulfilled every day, which is why they're very happy people. I don't know many salespeople whose dreams in life were to get to sales. Most people get into it by default, and they just see it as a part-time thing till they find something better. And as a result, they don't really put the effort in or the training in that they should to become as good as they can be. So you brought up a really good point there.
I do know a salesperson that was like that. My father, who sounds a little bit like your father in a way, in that he retired in his early 70s. He then came to work for me in the office in my business because he didn't want to sit at home. Sadly, we lost him at the end of last year. But his last sales job was selling caravans, which was an absolute passion of his. We had so many great caravanning holidays when I was a kid. We had so many great caravanning holidays when my kids were little, all because of my dad. But actually, because he was passionate about caravanning, he'd bring some couple onto the forecourt, he'd sit them in a caravan, he'd make them a cup of tea in the caravan, he'd tell them the stories about the caravan. And what he was selling, if you like, was the experience of the caravan. He wasn't passionate about the sales and the numbers. He was an incredible salesperson. He even had me, one of my first selling experiences as a teenager was up at one of these great caravanning shows at the NEC, selling porta potties, like portable caravan toilets. He managed to galvanize his sales team with a story and a competition about who could tell the best toilet stories. Given that most of us were like late teens, early 20s, and it was fabulous. But our stand at the NEC was rocking with laughter for 3 or 4 days, and we sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of toilets because we sold the experience to people. Were any of us passionate about toilets? Not really, but we were passionate about the experience and the engagement and the connection. And I think that for salespeople that are selling because they need to earn a living in order to live the life they want to live, there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. But bring a bit of yourself into your selling. Bring a bit of yourself into the stories that you tell and the connection that you make with other human beings. That way you're going to sell so much more. And for every great story you've got bad stories as well. I went into a Land Rover dealership probably a decade ago now. I'd saved and saved. I desperately wanted a Freelander, and I'd been saving to buy this Freelander, and I just got to the point that I could afford a second-hand Freelander. So I trot into a Land Rover garage, which will remain nameless for its own self-preservation, with knowing how much I could spend, buying decision already made, wanted to test drive a Freelander and basically choose a car. And the sales guy came over to me and he said, is your husband with you? I That's his opening remark to me. No, my husband isn't with me. Would you like to organise a test drive when your husband is with you? Like, well, no, not really, because it's not his car. It's my car. I'm buying it. Oh, well, had you got a particular colour in mind? By which time, and he wasn't booking me a test drive because he said he didn't really want to do a second test drive if I had to come back to somebody else to check the car out for me. I drove out of there, back to Stratford-on-Avon, went into the local dealership, which I hadn't gone into in the first place because they were really small and they probably only had 2 or 3 Freelanders at a time there. Went into there and I said, I've got this much money. I want to buy a Freelander. Mm-hmm. This is what's just happened to me. I think I'm horrified. Within 15 minutes, I'd walked out having spent about £2,000 more than the money I had and got the perfect Freelander.
That's so funny. That's exactly
it's all about connection, isn't it?
Do you know something? If only that was the first time I'd heard a story like that. Do you know, this is that old phrase about clutching defeat from the jaws of victory seems to be ideally placed, you know, putting barriers in the way of people. If someone's coming along and they want to buy, let them buy. But connecting with people and understanding what's going on. And my goodness, this is a really big subject, but we could talk, you know, for a long time about that. But recognizing the sign, communication skills, all of those things. Well, first of all, Lynda, I'm really sorry on the behalf of the sales community, you had that experience. And sort of in the second strand of my sort of career right now is to try and improve the perception of sales as a profession. But stories like that aren't really kind of helping, but they're pervasive.
But I think the real learning in here, though, is the poor guy that was not selling me the car. You know, he'd swallowed the textbook. You know, somewhere within that organisation, they'd been taught that women are not buyers, that women are more interested in colours, and don't waste your time on test drives if you're going to have to do it another time. If that guy had just stepped back for a minute and been able to connect as a human being, he would have listened a little bit more and realised that, and you know, and this is a message for anybody in sales, whether you're selling cars or whether you're selling your own business, whether you're selling yourself, your services, listen, because the person will tell you where they are, they'll tell you how to connect with them, and they'll tell you how to get the sale because they'll tell you what they're concerned about. But if you don't stop to listen, you don't make that connection, you don't create the opportunity for the other person to step in and buy. And I think we all have work to do on listening. We all have work to do neurologically to be able to make the other person, whether you're selling or not, actually just in your normal human relationships, make the other person feel like they are valuable, like they're safe, and like it's okay to interact and trust you.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Now, I think it's quite interesting. We were talking about the experience and the storytelling about 5 minutes ago. And what I remember most in this interview, I mean, I've got so many notes here, but the car experience is the one I remember the most because of the experience, because of the storytelling, and because 2 years ago, one of the first articles I wrote on LinkedIn was about almost an identical experience. My wife at the time and I went to get a car for our daughter. And I said to the car salesman, my wife and I are, you know, we're going to buy a car together for our daughter. We're both going to be paying for it. And he kept talking to me. And twice I had to say to him, you know, my wife and I are getting involved. He goes, oh, brilliant. So, sir, and he just, you know, it was incredible. But look, we've got so many, I mean, I've written down so many notes here, Lynda. This is incredible. You know, everything from email writing, is it relevant? Is it of value? It's about connecting with people. I absolutely love that. One of the things we were talking about in the health and well-being side, you know, how do I add value to the person? How do I serve people better? I love that phrase. It's just so good. And sales is not an isolated activity, which is ironic because most of the spam I get, I never get again. and you have to give to get something first. So these are, and of course, the storytelling and the experience. These are some of the great notes you've given us today. Keith, anything you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I love the bit about serving. So I believe wholeheartedly in something called samurai selling. If anyone's come across that before, Sun Tzu, to serve. That's absolutely all about service, and but value and relevance. My goodness, those. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal that, Lynda. which I normally say at the end of these things.
You said that in every episode we've had so far. So yeah.
These are actually all in disguise. This is all about teaching me how to sell, actually. So and it's working really, really well. So value and relevance. If we could just get to that phase for writing emails, value and relevance, my goodness, the world would be a much more productive place to be. So Lynda, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Niraj, let me hand back to you if that's
no problem. And Lynda, how can our audience connect with you then, please? What's the best way to do that?
The easiest way is to be part of our online community, which is based in Facebook, but you can get there by going to www.bravescene.com/braver, and that will take you to the Facebook group. I'm in there every week doing things like this, but it's also quite a vibrant, chatty community where there's lots of other business wisdom in there beyond mine that will help you with things. So that's probably a really good starting point. Failing that, our website's bravescene.com. Please feel free to connect with me or on any of my social media platforms.
Fantastic, will indeed. And look, if we have any further questions, any points you want to raise at all, you'd like to discuss with us for future shows, please email us at hello@thrivingsales.com. We would love to hear from you, and don't forget to press subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, before we go, Keith and I are both massive fans of the TV show Frasier. So until next Wednesday lunchtime, we are wishing you good sales mental health. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Right, I'm going to